According to sources cited by Newsweek, it has been suggested that Ukraine should utilize its older tank fleet to navigate the heavily mined areas that Russia has strategically placed in order to impede the progress of Kiev's forces. This recommendation comes as Ukraine's gradual counteroffensive effort is slowly achieving hard-fought territorial gains for the war-torn nation. The development of the T-64 main battle tank began in 1954 with the first production tanks delivered to the Soviet Army. In 1963, it was formally adopted in 1967 and publicly revealed in 1970. In total, over 6,000 T-64 tanks of various versions were manufactured, although some sources suggest that as many as 1,100 T-64 series tanks were built. When initially introduced, the T-64 featured numerous innovative design elements but also had notable limitations. It was exclusively used within the Soviet Union and never exported. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine retained approximately 1,500 of these tanks, making it the primary operator. Russia had a substantial number of T-64 tanks in storage, but by 2013 most of them were reportedly scrapped. Since 2014, upgraded Ukrainian Army T-64 tanks have been involved in combat during the ongoing military conflict in Ukraine. So why should it be T-64s, and what makes them more pivotal for the Ukraine right now than the Leopard tanks at the beginning of 2023? Nearly a year into the full-scale conflict, Ukraine's military had approximately 250 T-64BV and 50 T-64BM main battle tanks in their inventory, according to data from the International Institute for Strategic Studies 4. And subsequently, the arrival of German-made Leopard 1 and Leopard 2 tanks along with the UK's Challenger 2 main battle tanks has bolstered the mechanized battalions available for deployment by newly trained Ukrainian forces. However, these resources are not without limits. When Kiev launched its highly anticipated counteroffensive in early June, Ukrainian commanders initially utilized their recently acquired Leopard tanks on the front lines as they assessed the Russian defenses positioned in the eastern and southern parts of the nation. In the initial stages of June, Ukrainian fighters attempted to use Leopard tanks but encountered difficulties when navigating the minefields that the Russians had prepared as part of their layered defense strategy, as explained by Marina Marin, a postdoctoral researcher specializing in war studies at King's College London, UK. When throughout the summer season in Ukraine, minefields have posed considerable challenges for advancing Ukrainian forces. Ukraine was well aware of this obstacle. Just 1 month into the counteroffensive, President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged that Kiev had aimed to launch the counteroffensive earlier with the goal of pushing back Russian forces before they could reinforce their defenses. Around 2 months into the offensive, Oleksiy Reznikov, former Minister of Defense of Ukraine at that time, described the situation as having hundreds of kilometers of minefields with millions of explosive devices, and in certain sections of the front line there were reportedly up to 5 mines per square meter. As a result, as per Dutch open-source intelligence outlet Oryx, there have been documented losses of 6 Leopard 2A4s and 9 of the more recent 2A6s thus far. Nevertheless, this count only takes into account losses that have been visually confirmed, and the actual number may be higher. This experience served as a harsh lesson for the Ukrainian forces. In line with this, Dan Rice, a former U.S. Army officer with prior advisory experience to Ukraine's top military leader General Valery Zaluzhny, highlighted the imprudence of exposing their top-notch tanks to known minefields. According to Rice, tanks like the older T-64, which are less advanced and sophisticated, are considered more expendable. On the other hand, Leopard and Abrams tanks would prove more effective when they can engage Russian forces at high speeds and in capitalizing on any breakthroughs in heavily mined areas if Ukraine manages to achieve them. Thus, he suggested keeping them in reserve until a breakthrough in a minefield or during an envelopment strategy. For these reasons, utilizing these Western-manufactured tanks, especially in Zaporizhia, the fiercely contested southern Ukrainian region, carries significant risks. According to Myron, this risk arises not only from the presence of mines but also due to the distinct geographical features of the area, which make these tanks easily detectable by the Russians' foreign